Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there lived a beautiful princess named Snow White. Her skin was as fair as snow, her lips as red as a rose, and her hair as black as ebony. Snow White was kind and gentle, beloved by all who knew her. But not everyone in the kingdom adored Snow White. Her stepmother, the queen, was consumed by jealousy. Every day, the queen would stand before her magic mirror and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" And every day, the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is fairer than you." Enraged by this answer, the queen hatched a wicked plan. She summoned a huntsman and ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest, kill her, and bring back her heart as proof. The huntsman reluctantly agreed, but when the time came to carry out his grim task, he couldn't bring himself to harm the innocent princess. "Run, Snow White," he cried. "Run far away and never return to the castle." Snow White fled into the dark forest, branches scratching at her face and dress as she ran. She ran until her legs could carry her no further, collapsing in exhaustion as night fell. When morning came, Snow White awoke to find herself surrounded by curious woodland creatures. Rabbits, deer, and birds gathered around her, sensing her kind nature. With their help, she found her way to a tiny cottage nestled deep in the woods. The cottage was a mess, with dirty dishes piled high and dust covering every surface. Snow White, being the helpful soul she was, decided to clean the little house. She swept and dusted, washed the dishes, and even prepared a delicious meal. Exhausted from her efforts, she climbed the stairs and fell asleep across 7 tiny beds. As the sun began to set, 7 little men trudged home from a long day of work in the diamond mines. They were the owners of the cottage. 7 dwarfs named Duck, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. Imagine their surprise when they found their home spotless and a beautiful young woman asleep in their beds. When Snow White awoke, she was startled to find 7 pairs of eyes staring at her. But the dwarfs were kind, and after hearing her story, they offered her a place to stay. "You can live here with us," said Doc, the leader of the group. "We'll protect you from the evil queen." And so, Snow White found a new home with the 7 dwarfs. She kept house for them, cooking and cleaning while they worked in the mines. The dwarfs grew to love her as if she were their own sister. And for a time, all was well in the little cottage in the woods. But back at the castle, the queen discovered that Snow White was still alive. Her magic mirror never lied, and it told her that Snow White remained the fairest in the land. Furious, the queen disguised herself as an old peddler woman and set out to find Snow White. When she arrived at the dwarf's cottage, she found Snow White alone. The princess, not recognizing her stepmother in disguise, kindly welcomed the old woman. The queen offered Snow White a beautiful red apple, claiming it was a magic wishing apple. "One bite," she said, "and all your dreams will come true." Snow White, innocent and trusting, took a bite of the poisoned apple. Instantly, she fell into a deep sleep. So deep it was as if she were dead. The queen cackled with glee and fled into the forest, certain that her evil plan had succeeded at last. When the dwarfs returned home that evening, they were heartbroken to find Snow White lying lifeless on the floor. They couldn't bear to bury her, so they crafted a glass coffin and placed her inside, keeping constant vigil over their beloved friend. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Snow White lay in her glass coffin, as beautiful as ever, while the dwarfs watched over her. Then one day, a handsome prince who had heard tales of Snow White's beauty came riding through the forest. When he saw her lying in the coffin, he was struck by her loveliness. The prince asked the dwarfs if he could give Snow White one last kiss goodbye. As his lips touched hers, the piece of poisoned apple fell from her mouth, and Snow White awoke with a gasp. The spell was broken. The prince and Snow White fell instantly in love. He asked for her hand in marriage, and she joyfully accepted. The dwarfs cheered and danced with happiness, thrilled that their dear friend had found her happy ending. As for the wicked queen, her fate was sealed by her own evil deeds. When she learned that Snow White had survived and was to marry the prince, her heart filled with such rage and bitterness that it poisoned her from within. She withered away, leaving Snow White free to live happily ever after with her prince and her 7 loyal dwarf friends. And so, the tale of Snow White teaches us that kindness and purity of heart will always triumph over wickedness and jealousy. Snow White's gentle nature won her the love and protection of the dwarfs and the woodland creatures, while the queen's cruelty led to her own downfall. The story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs has enchanted generations of children and adults alike. It reminds us of the power of friendship, the importance of looking beyond appearances, and the enduring strength of love. In the end, Snow White's goodness shone brighter than any magic mirror, proving that true beauty comes from within. As we close this magical tale, we're left with the image of Snow White and her prince riding off into the sunset, the 7 dwarfs waving goodbye with tears of joy in their eyes. And though they lived happily ever after, the story of Snow White and the 7 dwarfs lives on. A timeless reminder that good will always triumph over evil, and that even in the darkest of forests, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow.